So first up, with a talk titled Target and Non-Target Analysis of Per and Polyfluoroalkyl Substances in Industrial Wastewater, is Damian Helbling, PhD, PE, Associate Professor at the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Cornell University. Dr. Helbling is a water quality engineer specializing in emerging organic chemical contaminants and holds a PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and is a Pennsylvania registered professional engineer. Damian?
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here as part of the second annual meeting for the New York State Center of Excellence in Healthy Water Solutions. I thank you all for joining this breakout session on targeted and non-targeted analysis of industrial PFAS discharges. You can see my title wasn't much. I kind of took inspiration, I guess, from the session theme when I made my title, which is going to focus on exactly that. So what I want to present to you today is a particular case study focusing on the electronics manufacturing industry. So electronics manufacturing facilities produce electronics products by means of nanofabrication and photolithography. And so the schematic here is showing some of the major steps involved in this process called photolithography. In photolithography, we spin a photosensitive material onto the surface of a silicon wafer. That's known as a photoresist. We use a photomask then prior to exposing that photoresist to UV radiation. That UV radiation causes a reaction to occur, and essentially it patterns the surface of the silicon wafer. We then have to clean off the wafer, get all of that photoresist off, and then we eventually have a clean wafer that we can send down for nanofabrication and downstream production of the chip. So maybe it's not a big surprise, but fluorinated materials are major constituents of photoresists and other related materials that are used during the photolithography process. And I can give you a couple of quick examples. So one classic example are photoacid generators. So photoacids are molecules that when absorbing light, they actually become acidic. They often exist as these cation-anion pairs. And photoacid generators used in photolithography, the anion part is almost always fluorinated. In fact, there are no viable alternatives for the anionic component of a photoacid generator that doesn't contain fluorine. So they're almost always a sulfonic acid with some fluorinated chain attached to them. Other materials that are often used for enhancing this process in one way or another are these fluorinated polymers. You can see there's a side chain fluorinated polymer here. These are things like anti-reflection coatings and top coats. The fluorine atoms in these polymers impart a lot of really important chemical and physical properties to these polymers, like low refractive index, low surface energy. They help with immiscibility if you're layering things on top of the chip. There are recent studies that demonstrate there are some fluorine-free materials available for these processes, but none of them have been demonstrated in terms of like economic viability. So we know fluorine-containing materials are used during chip manufacturing, and so what we wanted to do was to understand better the extent to which those fluorinated materials end up in aqueous wastewater emissions from these manufacturing facilities. So I'm going to present some data on target and non-targeted analysis of wastewater samples collected from 3 electronics fabrication facilities in the US. And this is a picture of what the samples look like. The browner ones were collected basically right at the photolithography tools. And then this is kind of like flowing downstream within the fab. And the last ones are actually the discharge from the fab. Those are probably the ones of most interest to us. We use liquid chromatography coupled to high resolution mass spectrometry to measure these samples. And we had 25 target PFAS that we looked for. There was nothing about these target PFAS that were selected because of the electronics industry. They were just ones that are typically measured. One thing that I want to point out is oftentimes classes of PFAS, for example, these perfluorocarboxylic acids, are present as homologous series. What that means is that there's actually 11 perfluorocarboxylic acids here, ranging in carbon number from 4 carbons to 14 carbons. So these classes are often present in homologous series, meaning that they're structural homologs that just differ by the length of this carbon chain. This will be important later, so I just want to point that out now. Okay, so we got these samples, we measured them in these 3 fabs. This is the data. There were 25 target PFAS. We found 8 of those 25 target PFAS in most of the samples from all 3 fabs, A, B, and C. Those 8 PFAS are listed along the x-axis, concentration on a log scale, on the y-axis, nanograms per liter. 2 points that I want to make about this data, or these data. Number 1, most of the target PFAS that were detected were members of this homologous series of perfluorocarboxylic acids, ranging in carbon length from 4 carbons to 10 carbons. I know this is like an alphabet soup, but I'll do my best to explain. The other notable thing is that there was really only one perfluorosulfonic acid. It was this PFBS. This is the 4-carbon sulfonic acid. And this one perfluorosulfonic acid was always detected at the highest concentration. When we consider concentrations in this wastewater, we can see that most of them are hovering in like the 10 to 100 nanogram per liter range. If we just consider the downstream samples collected at the effluent from the fabs, PFBS alone, you can see, ranges between about 100 and 400 nanograms per liter. If we sum up all of the PFAS that we measured in those effluent samples, we can see it's maybe between about 300 and 700 nanograms per liter. So this PFBS makes up a significant fraction of the target PFAS concentrations in the wastewater emissions from these facilities. So that's the first half of the story. That's the targeted PFAS. Because we used high-resolution mass spectrometry, that also opens up the door for us to do what we call non-target analysis, which allows us to screen for unknown or unexpected PFAS. And the way that I explain that is with a picture like this. So we can take data from the high-resolution mass spectrometer, we can plot it with retention time on the y-axis and then the mass of the molecule on the x-axis. Every one of these blue dots represents a specific chemical in the wastewater sample. Most of them are not fluorinated, but some of them certainly are. And if we know the address on how to look one up, for example, we know the mass of PFOA, we also know its retention time, it would show up here. So one of these blue dots in this little red circle is PFOA. So we have the ability to generate these dots. How can we then discover unexpected or unknown PFAS from this ocean of dots? This is where this idea of homologous series comes in. So because we know most PFAS are present as classes and as homologous series, again, every gray dot is a chemical, we used a data mining algorithm to identify evidence of homologous series within this large data set. And so this black string here represents the homologous series of perfluorocarboxylic acids, and all of the red ones represent homologous series of PFAS that we have no idea what they are. We actually discovered 41 homologous series in these samples, and that comprised 133 individual PFAS homologs. So there's a lot of non-target PFAS in this electronics manufacturing wastewater, maybe not so surprising. So we spent a lot of time and a lot of work trying to elucidate structures of these 133 homologs. Once we had structures, we tried to piece that together to explain, like, where are they coming from? Is this photoacid generators? Is this these fluorinated polymers? Is it something else? We were able to do that. But the thing that I want to talk about today is we also developed a technique to semi-quantify these. So we can't quantify these with a lot of sensitivity, but we can do our best. And so what this plot is showing are, again, the 3 electronics facilities. Dark bar is the sum concentration of the target PFAS. Light bar is the sum concentration of the non-target PFAS. Notice the very large error bars on the non-target PFAS. That reflects our uncertainty in trying to quantify those. But one thing is clear, non-target PFAS are more abundant than target PFAS in almost all of these samples, even if you consider our lowest sort of like confidence interval on these lighter bars. This was the data that I showed in the first half. If we now include all of the PFAS, including the non-target PFAS, you can see that increases the estimated concentration from anywhere from 2-fold to 200-fold. So including these non-target PFAS can be really important when estimating the total fluorine burden in wastewater emissions from these types of facilities. And this last figure just shows it as percent abundance, and the key point that I want to make here, these being the non-target PFAS, these being the target PFAS, also on a fractional basis, the majority of the PFAS found in these wastewater samples are non-target PFAS. So this was a study that we did a few years ago, and I just want to end on this slide. Like, so now what? Like, okay, we measured these things. What do we do from here? So we've actually been continuing to work on this problem ever since. There's a number of things that we're doing. We're trying to do a complete assessment of the fate and transformation of fluorinated materials used during electronics manufacturing. We've improved our sampling strategies. We've improved our ability to measure things. We've improved our understanding of transformations. And so we've really come a long way. Some of this data is already published as well, and some of it is sort of in the pipeline. The last thing I want to mention here is kind of a plug. So I'm also involved in another project that really, the goal of this project is to help industries find alternatives to fluorinated materials for use in their industrial processes or in their products. So I'm a member of a project team. It's a National Science Foundation funded convergence accelerator team called PFAS. We have the tagline, faster solutions for forever chemicals. The PIs for this project are 2 colleagues of mine from IBM, but I'm involved along with some colleagues of mine at some other academic institutes and some other organizations. And essentially what we're trying to do is develop a suite of tools that would allow industries to first identify fluorinated materials in their supply chains. You'd be shocked to realize how little they know about even where fluorine is coming into their business. Do real-time AI-assisted hazard assessment of those materials that are coming into their business. And then, probably most importantly, be able to recommend non-fluorinated and demonstrably safe materials as alternatives for those processes. And then finally, at the end of this project, we intend to establish mechanisms by which we can translate some of this emerging science from the non-competitive phase into the competitive phase of those business models. So this is a really exciting project that really has the potential to be a game changer, I think, when it comes to this discussion about PFAS and industrial emissions of PFAS. I thought it was really important to mention it in a session like this. With that, I want to conclude. If you're intrigued by this PFAS thing, you can try to click on this QR code. We made this awesome 3-minute marketing video that you can queue up and maybe watch after the session is over. Meanwhile, I'd like to acknowledge, some of the Cornell team that's sitting in this room that's involved in these semiconductor or electronics-related projects, along with the PFAS team and our funding sources. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Damien. And if there's a quick question for clarification, we can take it while I'm inviting up here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I see a hand. Yes, please raise it high.
Oh, behind me.
Go ahead.
This was a great talk. I was just wondering if, because PFAS was not a target compound and you saw greater concentrations of non-target compounds, if that was influenced by PFAS concentrations.
So PFAS was a target compound. So I didn't go through all the targets clearly, but there was a group of homologous perfluorosulfonic acids. PFOS was one of them. I can tell you anecdotally, the industry phased PFOS out like 2 decades ago, replaced it with PFBS, which is why we measured it, which has now subsequently been phased out, but the replacement was not detected, let's say.
There's one more back here.
So is there a common treatment methodology that they're using in those plants?
There is not. Some of them have on-site biological treatment. Some of them have on-site reverse osmosis. All of them have like sort of various efficacy for this. But that last sample that I was demonstrating is actually what's leaving their footprint. So that's what's coming out.
All right. Thank you, Damien. We'll have